Okay, in this video we're going to be talking about action cleaning, all the exposed areas that can be dried, cleaned, and again we're looking for unburnt powder, dirty grease, any water ingress, etc, etc. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through the three different types of Purdey gun. The best gun over and under, best gun side by side, and the sporter, all of which have different exposed areas and different ways of different areas to be looking at. The techniques will be exactly the same, it's just the areas to look at that we're going to be covering off. For obvious reasons, dirt, water especially, is not good for the life of a shotgun or the mechanical function of a shotgun. So again, at the end of a shoot, it's always good to clean any exposed areas. And in the case of the sporter, which has a removable trigger plate, removing that trigger plate and giving that a clean and re-oil and grease. So, I'm going to cover off the best gun over and under first. As you can see, the area here where the barrels go into the breech is quite exposed. So it can get dirt, etc. coming back out of the barrels from shooting. You can get unburnt powder in there, you can get all kinds of stuff. Again, very similar to cleaning under the luggers in the barrel cleaning video, you want a paintbrush. Cut down, quite bristly, quite stiff. And with that, you can actually get in to most of the exposed areas down here in the gun. So you take your paintbrush and you'll start giving it a really good brush out, looking to loosen and where possible remove any of the dirt. If there are some stubborn areas, a small amount of gun oil just onto the sides. You can use that then as a bit of a lubricant to dislodge any dirt that might be residing in your action. Again, we can also use the cotton bud because there are some areas that are slightly tighter. Down underneath the trunnion pins, up in any slot down here. The wooden end is also quite useful because you're not going to damage any steel for getting down into these slots here, and anything that's built up in the slots or at the bottom can be removed from there. For nice clean slots, nothing of any foreign object in there that you wouldn't expect to be in there, and a clean and as shiny as possible surface. When looking at the face of the action, where the barrels meet the action themselves, you're looking there for any damage, you're looking for any unburnt powder, and again, you can be using your paintbrush, your cotton bud, and a rag if you have one close and handy. Same time as cleaning everything, you're also looking for any damage, anything that might have got in there where the barrels have closed on the action, with any debris in there, might have torn, might have damaged, might have got caught. So you're just looking to make sure there's nothing nasty in there. Nothing broken. Things are very obvious if they're broken. Your cocking rods here, if you notice any damage to those, then it will need to come back to us so we can have a little look at it and find out what's gone on. Again, if you notice anything with your strikers, anything pushing through the face that you're not happy about, again, bring it back to us. I'd like to mention at this stage as well, if your gun gets very wet on a shoot, there's obviously various things you can do to dry it out as best you can. This is one very important part of it, removing any obvious water from the outside of the gun. If it gets extremely wet, there's a very large possibility that you've had some ingress into the actual workings of the gun. On the best gun, that's both for the side by side and for the over and under, it is best that we get the gun back here at our Purdey workshop, strip it down and make sure everything's all well in there and there's no corrosion or anything nasty going on. So that is your exposed areas on your over and under. You can also at this point as well check all other areas. You're not just looking inside the action, you can look down at the trigger area, make sure there's nothing down here that can interfere with your trigger slot. Again, the cotton bud is very useful for that. It's removing any dirt or anything nasty. And you can just also do a very quick mechanical test, checking to make sure your safety catch is going on and off, checking the function of your lever. Obviously the over and under has a lever catch, so if you open it, it will stay in the open position. To release that, push your thumb down, push the lever catch backwards and release the lever, and that will come back over to home. And generally just making sure the gun pins are still up straight, nothing's loose, and everything's quite happy. Again, similar to the barrels, slightly oily rag, just gently, not leaving a residue as such, but just wiping off the outside exposed areas of metalwork. As I say, that is the exposed areas, as I say, in the action of the over and under. Moving on to the side by side, the techniques remain the same, but you are looking, the barrels on the side by side obviously go into these two slots here, the two steels. And again, you can get the build-up of debris, dirt, everything else I've already mentioned. So again, straight in with the paintbrush, loosening, removing, generally cleaning, and again, the cotton bud down underneath everything, getting any nastiness out. Again, wiping over, mechanical check, making sure your pins are still nice and tight. Anything you notice that's obviously wrong, again, we would like to see it back to sort out any problems you might have. Moving on, the sporter, again, exactly the same as the best gun over and under with the barrel slots and the action. Function test, the lever catch, you'll notice this lever catch is engaged. The lever catch on the sporter is actually up at the top here. Again, that can be pushed back with the thumb and released and brought home. Mechanical check, making sure everything's working. With the sporter, it's a lot easier for mechanics and the internals of the gun to be cleaned. At the back here, you'll see a thumb release. That's just simply a button that you push with your thumb, grip hold of the trigger guard and rotate the trigger unit out of the gun. It's best in this situation, you will generally find that the gun is cocked, is to hold both tumblers, gently release each side. Being careful not just to fire it off because it could hit your fingers, it could damage some other bits and pieces of the gun, but to do it under slow release. And again, we are then looking with our paintbrush to be removing any nasty build-up and deposit that we can see or find in the internals. And again, the cotton bud for any hard to reach areas. It's important to be using soft materials because obviously you don't want to risk damaging any of your mechanics of your gun. Again, the wooden end can be useful for just removing any bits and pieces that are in hard to reach areas. Please be careful not to break off any bits and leave them inside the internals of the gun because that could be quite interesting. And just removing anything nasty, any dirty oil, dirty grease, etc. Obviously now we've removed the grease and the lubrication and in effect dried the gun out. And again you can wipe it over with the rag. We need to re-grease the mechanism before we put it back in the gun. We're going to do that using some gun oil and some lubricant. Lubricant wise, you can use a mixture of petroleum jelly and 3-in-1 oil, or just a natural lubricating oil. Or there are some other waterproof, heatproof greases available from various suppliers. Oiling, it's important not to over oil. If you over oil anything, it will run through the mechanism, it can get into your wood, it can cause damage to the wood, etc. Oil is important for lubrication and rust protection, but it shouldn't be swamped in it. Areas to do are the mainspring swivels or rollers, the bob weight plunger, and that's pretty much all you want to oil. From there you can then go to your grease, and it's quite fine. If you have a paintbrush you can use that and just gently, doesn't again not overkill, just gently apply it to the mechanism like so. Again, you don't want too much because you don't want it swamped, but you do want it on all exposed areas of metalwork. Once you're happy that all the areas are clean, re-lubricated, you can then replace that back into the gun. If the gun's going to be stored for any period of time, in fact if it's going to be stored at all, I'd recommend you leave the gun in the fired position so the mainspring's not under any tension. It just means they're in a much more relaxed state and they're not constantly trying to hold a pressure, therefore will last longer. That is all the main body of the guns, so all of the actions, all of that area. We're going to have a quick look at the fore ends now, just because there are some exposed metalwork on that as well. Starting off again with the best gun OU. Inside the best gun OU is the ejector mechanism, which is on both sides of the fore end iron, which is the metal piece running down the middle. It is quite exposed, it can get water in it, it can get dirt in it. I recommend for this, anything you see going on in there is the cotton bud, so a nice clean cotton bud yet again. And without disrupting any of the mechanism, just really in there, cleaning, drying and removing anything that has built up. Again, at this stage, like the mechanism and the visual check on the outside, I'm going to look over the mechanism in there, make sure there's nothing obviously broken, nothing hanging out, nothing loose, nothing doing something it shouldn't be doing. Checking the pins to make sure everything's still up and square. Checking the fore end push rod for free movement. And just having a good wipe down again of the metalwork with my rag. The Sporter forend and the side-by-side forend are very much more sealed up and have less exposed parts than the over and under. So with the Sporter, there's very little going on in here, so I can just check it again visually to make sure there's no damage. I will clean in the back here where the cams are, just to make sure there's not any horrible build-ups. And just the usual, no looseness, and wipe over gently with the metal parts. Side by side, again, it is a visual check to make sure nothing's broken, nothing's in the wrong position, nothing's loose. Dry, nothing leaking out of it or any horrible. Checking the back here as well, just cleaning off any dirt that may have got into the knuckle and around the rear end of the ejector mechanism. And again, just the wipe over the metalwork. So over the 3 different types of Purdey that we have here on the table, we've covered off all the exposed areas that are easily cleaned and easily maintained after a shoot, and recommended that they are done so.